Okay. Welcome everyone to our eRequesting TDG. One of many that we're going through more ballot reconciliation. I'll just start things off with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we all gather today. We pay our respects to our elders past and present and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators, and healers. Let's go into the agenda. Like I said, Stuart was going to be chairing, but obviously he hasn't been able to make it. So I'll chair. I'll run through all the agenda items, including the usual business. We are going to follow up on the review of our meeting times moving forward for daylight savings. We had a tie in the vote on our last meeting, so we'll have that one again today. And then I'll provide an update on where we are with the ballot for working standard, and we'll work through ballot reconciliation. And so the number of those was sent out a week ago, so you can have a review before the meeting, but we'll go through and make some, see if we can perform some votes on those items. It's usual business, approval of minutes. So we have our meetings from our last meeting. I'll put the link in the chat. We've got our attendance, we've got our recording. We just note that the slides aren't here, but I'll put an action on myself to add the slide pack from the last meeting as well. We've got the recording, just missing the slide pack, but I'll add that in. And then we've got our minutes with the decisions for the votes that we included. So these minutes were sent out a week ago, I think last Thursday, with the agenda for this meeting. So does anyone else need any more time to review these minutes before we look to approve them? No? Would someone like to motion that we accept these minutes?
I'll motion to accept the minutes.
Thanks, Michael. Do we have a second?
Will do a second.
Thanks, Ilya. I will launch poll. Oh, previous minutes. Hopefully this was the right one. So yeah, you can just add your vote. I'll just give that another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. End it there. So we have 12 affirmative plus 1 in the chat, so 13 affirmative, 0 negative, and 5 abstain. So that motion has passed. We'll accept those minutes. So we didn't have any other agenda. There was no other outstanding action items. So we will move into the next agenda item, which is about daylight savings time. So yeah, daylight savings starts on the 5th of October for ACT, New South Wales, Vic, South Australia, and Tas. Our current meeting time is 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, so Brisbane time, essentially. So we've got two options here. We either remain on Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is that option 1, and I've put the times in there. So that will remain at 11 a.m. Queensland time. It'll move to 12 p.m. for ACT, New South Wales, Victoria, and Tasmania. It will move to 11:30 a.m. South Australia, 10:30 for Northern Territory, and 9 a.m. I think it will remain at 9 a.m. for Western Australia. Option 2 is we change to Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So that essentially means we'll remain with 11 a.m. meeting time, but it's basically whether option 1 is 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or it's 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time. So with option 2, that would be 10 a.m. Queensland time, 11 a.m. ACT, New South Wales, Victoria, and Tas, 10:30 South Australia, 9:30 NT, and 8 a.m. Western Australia. So that was a point that was raised. We do have some people that join this meeting from Western Australia. If we might change to option 2, that will be early for them, 8 a.m. Before business hours. So that was just noted in the last one. So that may or may not be the tiebreaker. Are there any questions on that before I launch a poll so that we can determine which one we would prefer to move forward with? No. All right, I do have a poll that I have put together and find the right one. Okay, so hopefully there you can see that the option 1 and option 2 aligns with what you're seeing on the screen. Essentially, no preferences and abstain. So just see where we land with that.
Supporting my fellow sand groper, Adrian Hunt.
Yes. And he is here in this meeting too. So it was a good point. Okay, I think we've had most people voted now. That seems fairly complete. We've got 21 of 22 participants, so I think that's pretty complete. And I'll end the poll. And so we do now have a clear preference for option 1, which is remaining on Australian Eastern Standard Time. So yeah, 11 a.m. Queensland time, 12 p.m. ACT New South Wales, 11:30 a.m. South Australia, and 10:30 Northern Territory, and 9 a.m. Western Australia. So that was, we had 11 for that. We had 5 for option 2, and we had 5 with no preference. So that traditionally has been where we've been. We've kind of remained on Australian Eastern Standard Time, but we'll do this every time of daylight saving change, just to make sure that the TDG is happy with continuing. So what I'll do now, given that we do have an outcome from that, is I will send out new meeting invites for the recurring TDG meetings. You'll probably notice it actually ran out today because there was no meetings beyond this date because we hadn't agreed on the time. So they'll come back into your calendar for the next meeting onwards. Okay, update on ballot for working standard. So we're going to do this every meeting. For people that are new to the meeting and might have been coming into this, and also just so everyone knows where we're up to in our progress with this. So as we now know, the ballot period has closed, and we're in the ballot reconciliation period. With the outcome of the ballot, we had 59 eligible to vote, and of that, we had 9 affirmative and 36 negative votes. So as of now, we currently don't have the authority to publish. So what we need to do is we need to get our affirmative vote up to 60%. It's currently 20%. But what we'll do is, as we're going through reconciliation, we will resolve issues that have been raised on the ballot. And then at the end of the reconciliation period, HL7 Australia will go back to the balloters and say, would you like to withdraw your vote? So if the voters are happy that the issues have been resolved, they can remove their negative votes, and they'll turn into affirmatives, which will then push our percentage up and hopefully get us to the 60%, where we'll have the mandate to publish. And looking here, as we have a lot of ballot issues to get through, but hopefully we can get through them and look for a publication in February next year. This was just a quick summary. This won't change in general, although I maybe should have updated this. We had 1 or 2 change requests that were actually technical corrections, so we've changed them, but you can see the percentage, the majority of them are change requests. Got a couple of technical corrections of our 99 issues that have been raised. And then this is where we're at so far. So of those 99 issues, the co-chairs have triaged 37% of those. We've reconciled, which have been through votes. So they've either been through technical corrections, which the co-chairs can reconcile, or they're going through the TDG. So Of those 37, 22 of them have been reconciled. And then of those 22 that have been reconciled, 11 have been applied. So that applied means that they're actually in the continuous integration build of the IG. So if you go to the CI build of the IG, you'll see changes going in there that have been applied. So we'll keep coming back to this and work through them and see with our target of getting to that 99. Quick summary again. I'll just do this on each meeting quickly, just so that anyone new to the meeting has an idea of what we're doing. So we're going through the ballot reconciliation, resolving those issues that have been raised in ballot. So the co-chairs do a triage of that. We have meetings twice a week to go through those and triage and come up with draft dispositions. Those will get sent out to the TDG members. So we're normally doing that on the Thursday, a week prior to a meeting. So you've got a chance to review what that disposition has been proposed. We will then bring those to a meeting or an electronic vote where the TDG has the opportunity to vote on those issues. And then at the end of the process, I told you before, when we get to the end of ballot, we'll go back to the voters to see if they're happy to withdraw their negative votes. And then we'll determine if we're passed and if we can publish or we need to reballot. For our dispositions that we're looking at when we're resolving these through the TDG, we can either identify them as considered for future use. So they wouldn't form part of release 1, but they may form part of a future release. We can say they're persuasive. The proposed change we made more or less as proposed. Persuasive with modification, a change we made to the specification that addresses the issue, but it's not, but it is notably different than the one proposed. Not persuasive, that no change will be made. We'll indicate why we don't think it's persuasive, and then we have not persuasive with modification, which we don't agree with the issue that was raised, but we will make a change, probably at some form of clarification in the IG. And then we have duplicate. Some issues will be the same as one we've already resolved, so we'll determine that they're the same and mark them as duplicates, or they can be retracted, which is the person who raised the issue removes it. All right, any questions before we actually get into ballot reconciliation in that process? I think we're getting familiar with it now, so we should get the hang of it. Okay, so these are the issues.
Sorry, can you tell me
yep.
where we can see the whole list of comments, all comments?
Yep, so when you say comments, the whole list of issues or the issues raised on the ballot? Yep,
Yes.
I can certainly show you that. So jump to the right page. Okay, I'll put this in the chat. This is our ballot reconciliation page, which, sorry, jumping around a bit. Yep, here we go. And this has got the current stats, so this will be updated periodically. There is a link here, which is a Jira filter for all ballot issues. So if you click that, you will see a list of all the ones and their current status as well, where they're at. So there will also, that same page has votes that are upcoming. So as we're scheduling things for meetings, this will be on here. We've also got the votes that are completed. So which meeting they've been through, whether they've been applied. I need to update a few of these. So that's all on this page.
Thank
you. So the first one I'm going to talk about here is with the email that went out a week ago about what was coming up in this meeting. There was also included that a block vote. So an electronic vote, which I can just talk a little bit more about what a block vote is. So given we've got 99 issues, we can't feasibly bring all of those to a TDG meeting and talk about them in this forum. We just won't get through them all. So block voting is a way to group a set of Jira issues for review and voting. And when you vote on that, your vote applies across the set of Jira issues in that block. So if you vote affirmative, you're voting to approve the proposed disposition of all the items in the set. And we're doing block votes as e-votes. So I'll walk you through that in a sec, but it's essentially electronic vote. And you have some options in that electronic vote. If you don't want to vote for them as a block, you can refer items to telecon, which is a funny way of saying refer them to a meeting, right? So that was, you feel that you want to talk about them in a meeting rather than actually leave them as part of the electronic vote. And you also need to, as part of that, provide a comment to indicate why it needs to be discussed, so that we can prepare to bring it to the meeting. The same with if you vote negative, you also need to provide a comment. So if you vote negative and don't provide a comment about why you're voting negative, it will be considered an abstain. So we have this one block vote now that is active, which is the eRequesting block vote 1. I will put that in the chat, so you've got the link, so you can go to it. We'll likely, between every eRequesting TDG, be running block votes. We may even run multiple between meetings so that we can get through our 99 issues. So each of the block votes here will have a number on it. This is block vote 1. There's some guidance here with some instructions as well at the top of the page. We will indicate here when we're going to indicate the results of the e-vote. So this will be on the 9th of October call. So after each e-vote closes, we'll bring back and announce to the TDG what the result and the outcome of that was. So that will be indicated on here. And then we've got the issues that form part of this block vote. So we've got each of the JIRA numbers, the summary, who reported it, its current status, and the proposed resolution. So whether it's persuasive notification, not persuasive, considered for future use, whatever it happens to be. So each of these can have different resolutions. They don't all have to be the same as part of the block vote. But when you are voting on the whole block, not individual items. Your vote applies across the whole block. If you want to see what the resolution actually is, the description, because this says it's persuasive, if you open the item, it will take you to the JIRA. Hopefully you can see that. Oh, go about that, it's just big. So down the bottom here is the description of the issue. This is what's been raised. And then you'll see up the top here, the proposed resolution. This is saying it's persuasive. And then it'll have the resolution description. So this is proposing how we're going to resolve it. And this is proposing here that we add the profile-specific implementation guidance to the task. And that's the guidance there. So each of these issues have that. Look at the next one. This is persuasive. That's the resolution. Let's see if there's one with modification. There's one here with modification. You'll see this one is persuasive with modification. And the resolution here is to replace the first paragraph on the use case page with this text. Right. So the actual issue didn't have any specific text. So this one's saying modification, saying, yes, we're going to change it. But this is the text we're going to propose to do it. So for this electronic vote, the actual voting part is down the bottom here. You'll see for this, you have the option to vote affirmative, negative, abstain, or refer to telecon. To actually vote in this, you do need to log in. So up the top here, I'm logged in, but if you're not, there is a login option up the top, and you can register to create an account if you don't. You don't have to be a HL7 member. They're free accounts. So anyone part of the TDG can create an account, and I would recommend you do that so you can participate in these votes. Then you can place your vote. You can change your vote if you want after the fact. Up until the time the vote closes, you can change your vote. If you are voting negative, if you are voting refer to telecon, as part of that vote, you need to add a comment to say why. Then it will be if you've got to refer to telecon, you need to say which issue. You'll say fire 52165. I don't agree with the disposition. I would like to talk about it in the TDG, something like that. And therefore, what we will do is we will remove that item from the block vote, and it will then go on the agenda for a TDG meeting. But the other items would remain in the block vote, and the vote can continue on those existing items. You can see here the vote opened on the 18th of September. It's going to close on the 29th of September, so that's on Monday. And then the final vote will be put in here once that vote has closed. So I would recommend that you have a look at that today if you can, even during the meeting if you can, and place your votes so that we can get as many people reviewing and participating in that vote as possible. And that's the process we're going to move forward with in between meetings, out of session votes. And so you'll see those as well as items coming through the TDG. Any questions on the electronic vote? No, you can always reach out and contact me if you do. If you have any issues voting, we can take the vote. Obviously, the preference is to do it electronically through the site. But if you're not, let me know, and we'll still record your vote. Okay. So that's the block vote. If you can, do that today. And we'll go through the other ones, which we'll discuss in the meeting, and see if we can get some resolution on those. So the first two, a couple of these today in this meeting are related. So what we'll probably do is we'll go through one or two of them and then go back and vote on them rather than doing them all sequentially, just given there is a relationship between them two, and it may help us resolve them more completely by having seen them in the context of the other issue. So I'll start with the first one. This is about communication request sender data type. So this is actually a carryover from our last meeting. We started the conversation on this in the last TDG, but we didn't get to the point where we could vote. The co-chairs have taken some of that feedback that we got from that last meeting. We've updated the proposed disposition, and we are proposing consider future use on this one now. But let's open that up. Have a look. I'll close my other tabs. I've got too many open, and I'll put this in the chat. Is that big enough for everyone to see on the screen? Are we able to read that? Yep. Okay. So this issue was raised by Brett, and he's talking about the communication request profile, and was talking about healthcare service as a primary mechanism to identify the sender until organization is mandated. This will be compatible with provider directory endpoint location. Organization in provider directory context may well be managing organization, which is not the specific sender of interest for the communication request. And he proposed that we allow an AU core healthcare service as the sender data type. Now, when we talked about this in the last meeting, we actually thought that the recipient is more appropriate for healthcare service, or the requirement for recipient is probably more important than the actual sender for the use of healthcare service. But noting that we don't really know about the details about how the directory and endpoints and delivery and that might work with the future national infrastructure and directory services and the like that may be coming in the future. So that's why we've looked at the disposition. This one now is considered for future use. So the resolution we've got here is allowing healthcare service for communication request sender may be appropriate in some cases, but its use may be more relevant for communication request recipient. So we're kind of acknowledging that and saying, well, it may also be relevant for recipient. but then really saying that further assessment is needed to confirm the implications for delivery of the communication request to the intended recipient, alignment with the task owner and other profiles, and consistency with the emerging national directory services. So this change would be reconsidered in a future release once these aspects are clarified. So by us identifying something as considered for future use is basically saying, well, yeah, we think there is some merit in this, that it's something we should look at further. We flag it as considered for future use. That goes into our backlog, and then we can pull it off our backlog at any point in time in the future. So it's not set and forget, it's put there so we can consider it in the future. I might just talk about the other one now because it is related, and then we can sort of come back and work through the detail. So there is another one here, which is on location-specific imaging. I'll put that one in the chat as well. And this was raised by Andy. So this one's talking about location-specific and practitioner-specific requesting is more prevalent in imaging requests. Many specialists who wish to direct their patients to a specific location for service delivery. We're silent on this at present. Our fulfillment is directed to an organisation through an owner. We need a solution for location directed, maybe task location in addition to the owner organisation and directing to a specific radiologist. So looking at this, we're looking at this to be considered for future use as well, given that it has a potential relationship to healthcare service. So what proposed here is that location-specific and practitioner-specific requesting is recognised as more prevalent in imaging, where specialists may wish to direct patients to a particular site or radiologist. Supporting task location in addition to task owner, or allowing task owner to reference healthcare service may be appropriate approaches. Further assessment is needed to confirm whether the implications for delivery of the request to the intended recipient, alignment with communication request and other eRequesting profiles, consistency with the emerging national directory services. This change will be considered in future release once these aspects are clarified. So kind of group those together, given that healthcare service may be appropriate in this situation for defining a location-specific practitioner to refer it to, and using owner or location. So I think there's a bit of work here, and a lot of this may be driven by any emerging national directory service, as in how are these things represented in a national directory? Where is that appropriate? Where is it appropriate for communication requests? Where is it appropriate for when we're directing requests and the like? So that's where this is currently identifying. We really need to work through the implications of that. If we jump too early, we might head in the wrong direction or make a something that needs to change once these start emerging. Good. Questions on that, on either of these? Do we need any more detail, any more clarification, any comments?
But Michael, Vince here, I'm happy with the resolution of the second one. But for the first one, what would be the negative consequences of actually allowing healthcare service as the sender? I think it's actually important to know where information came from. And so being able to record the healthcare service that sent the information is actually an important piece of detail. If, for instance, that in some way became incompatible with any future directory, et cetera, there's no reason why we couldn't come back and review this. So I would see further result persuasive.
I think I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I think one of the, if we do look to introduce healthcare service here at this point in time, we then need to profile it. We need to put our obligations on it. We need to work out how it's going to be used, how it's going to be interpreted by different systems. So it's potentially, we don't have all the information we need to do that at the moment. We haven't really worked through how healthcare service is going to work in the broader ecosystem. With all of these things, like there is no exclusion of use when we're actually putting things on our profiles. So it's still part of the communication request profile. You can still use it. There is just no obligations on, actually, I'll take that back. There is, because we have constrained it. Let me just, let's have a look at the communication request profile.
Yeah, my hand was shooting up there, Michael. 'cause
Yeah,
you have-
sorry. It's good. I wasn't sure if you were
It is
here, Brett.
constrained.
So,
Yeah, I'm working.
we have constrained it. I'll just find it. It is sender. Yeah, so we've constrained it to only AU core organization. So you can't use anything else on there. And the recipient can be a practitioner role or a patient. So Brett, do you have another comment on that then about the?
No, I think you're right. In like, I think it does bring in what do you need in healthcare service that to do the business that you want to do, and I think directory business in terms of locating. Oh yeah, I put my issue on sender, but I really think it should be on recipient because it's one of the kind of key ways to identify a recipient, and it's aligned with things like the National Health Services Directory, use of healthcare service and stuff like that. So yeah, but I think it does bring in what would you need to populate for that any other purpose, which I think is an overlay. But yeah, my main concern was probably being restrictive. It kind of just means you can't do it. Yeah.
I think on that point, so you did say sender, but I think you're saying you really meant recipient, right? And so we've acknowledged that in
I
this
should look
consider
at
for
both.
future use
Yeah, I think so.
to say that we do think that's more relevant for recipient. And then that recipient is really more about how that the consistency and use there with any directory services that may be tied to. So I think that was the key here, is that we're using organization consistently in eRequesting. So for like this, the owner can only be the organization. It can't be a healthcare service. It can't be anything else. We've kind of used that for release 1 as the key resource we're using for the ownership and assignment of the request. So then for the communication request to do that differently would then potentially also cause more confusion about there is a mismatch between how that's represented on a communication request versus on the task. So I think that's kind of why we've sort of bundled it, that we really should look at this holistically. The use of healthcare service really should be looked holistically across the IG, because it probably applies in multiple places.
I think it's because it's attached to a communication request, because that was really my issue, was about communications and how to locate the channels, basically, where you could send responses, send reports back. I think also the you will likely not have, and that's really, I guess, related. Most of the actual requests are directed to an individual as a practitioner role, I think, which is another key. Yeah, which is another key services directory entity. So if they so I think you've got that covered in terms of like individual direction, which is probably most of what you're doing. Yeah, so it's just if you have something that's going to be directed back to a service rather than an individual, it kind of is locked down, so you can't do it using healthcare service anyway.
Yeah.
So I think I mean, I don't have a problem with letting it play out a bit and working out. Yeah.
I think that is the
Yeah,
point
so-
about the consider future
Yeah.
use too, is that we can pull this back in at any point in time, right? As soon as we have some more information, a firmer use case, then we just pull this off the backlog and
Yeah.
work through it.
And I think, yeah, the consequence of adding it back in is what you say. We'd need a profile to say, what do you need in healthcare service? And then the question is, why do you need it? You know, and then you're kind of bringing in requirements around report delivery, which I think is important, but at least the primary thing would be having an identity that you could latch onto. But I think yeah, I think that's got some distance to work out those requirements, because it's kind of linking the ordering to the reporting requirements on the other side as well, which I don't think have been necessarily thought about too much.
Yeah.
My concern is that certainly for an imaging request, you'd usually send that to a healthcare service because you may not even know which organization within that healthcare service is going to deliver that particular sort of imaging. And in fact, that may not happen until the patient turns up and they discuss the clinical situation, or whether they're going to have an ultrasound or whether they're going to have an MRI. I mean, whatever's on the request form is not necessarily what is going to be delivered. And that request would normally go to a healthcare service rather than to a particular organization within that healthcare service. So I'm not sure how that's going to work in the private sector, where we know that, you know, services are grouped together and different organizations will be providing different imaging subtypes.
So is this in the context of the communication request or the?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the communication request, yeah.
So the communication request is still tied back to the request itself as well. But I think here the recipient for the communication request, like Brett said, is a practitioner role, right? So that's very specific about where the communication is going to the practitioner role or a patient. I think we're addressing that. It is going to be very specific about where it's going.
Yes, so this communication request sender receiver, that's about where other information goes to.
So our communication requests at the moment are the copy to, the patient communication preferences, and the urgent. So there are three types of communication requests that we're dealing with at the moment. So the copy to and the copy to would be to a practitioner role. The patient is the patient, and the urgent is again the practitioner role, would be the recipient.
Yeah, it's only kind of covering the case where it's you don't have a specific recipient kind of delivery path where you're identifying an entity to deliver to, which I know is less common. Like because normally there's named individuals order requesting and receiving.
In diagnostics, that's not true. I mean, diagnostics.
Yeah.
You usually, you know, are sending communication to a service, not to a particular organization.
So we've also tied the requester of the service request to a practitioner role. So, for example, about the sending reports back.
Yeah, no, you have to have a practitioner do the request. But in fact, you know, where the request goes to and the copies to go to, et cetera, that's very commonly, certainly in imaging and pathology, goes to a service, not to a practitioner. I mean, I wouldn't know the name of a pathologist in a pathology company.
Yeah, and it's really like the premise is like, because I was coming at mainly from a provider directory, like secure messaging provider directory kind of setup where we had the key endpoint location entities are healthcare service and practitioner role, because that gives you kind of your location and endpoint detail to be able to send messages. Yeah, but that's like a particular, V2 delivery channel kind of,
Yeah. I mean, you do a
which is common.
referral to a specific practitioner, but you'll hardly ever send an imaging or pathology request to a specific practitioner. It goes to a service.
Recipient, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it's the thing you would, if adding it back in, particularly for recipient, is you'd have to, I guess, like at the moment, you don't have any deeper obligations, do you? Because you haven't written those profiles yet for practitioner role or patient yet that are specific for eRequesting. So if you added another one, you just add another thing to do, but that's all.
How are you expecting people to actually get the information to populate a practitioner role? For a pathology lab or a imaging service.
Yeah. That's a bit where I was coming from too, because like normally you just look up in your directory and get a service and it'd be going, yeah.
And I mean, it depends on which day of the week it is as to which practitioners are there.
So, but just to get the specifics of the type of communication that you are directing here, is it's
Responses.
why is it to a service and not a practitioner if we're like copying reports?
Well, you usually copy a report to a service, the practice where the patient attends. They may not even see a particular doctor. They just see whoever's on duty at the practice, or to another pathology provider who provides specialized services. Again, no practitioner role involved in that.
You guys.
Right? Yeah.
Can you guys?
Yep, sorry. Yes.
And I come back to the question: how would a message requester, a requester, know what practitioner role to put in the message in that request?
So, Adrian, I just thought I heard Adrian
Quite
speaking.
sure my microphone's working. My headset's playing up a bit this morning.
Yep.
Yeah, look, I would tend to agree. I mean, a request would be directed towards a service, but specifying a practitioner to actually carry out the radiology report is pretty rare. I don't think we see that. And I think for a request for the report to be sent, or a communication request, a lot of that stuff's it's defined in rules that are already in the system. So it'd be pretty rare that you override that probably with information coming in from a request, if that makes sense. Those are my two thoughts on the discussion, probably.
Yeah, because I think my understanding was like, and I've seen this in GP systems, is just naming other practitioners, and usually it's not even that structured. They may have their provider number if they're individuals that are meant to receive it, but it can also be like other services that want to receive the report, like you CC in other entities. So either they're individuals or healthcare service delivery destinations.
Critical
Yeah.
notification, probably the example of that one, I think, where that does
Yep.
that is in play, but beyond that, there's not a whole lot that gets directed like that. Yeah. I think.
I think it's more the edge, like, because I mean, most of the stuff is coming back to the requester. And that's one aspect, but the copy twos are, like usually specific people involved in someone's care on the GP side. That's what I've seen anyway.
So for the practitioner role, I'll just look at this. The only thing that needs to be provided is the practitioner, which is an AE core practitioner, and the only thing that needs to be provided in that is a family name. So it can be just a family name.
Yeah, most messaging would love you to populate the provider number.
Yeah, obviously, yeah,
because that's like a key.
having the provider number there. But the way it stands with these constraints and must supports on it at the moment.
That's the provider number for the requester, not for the receiver.
Oh no, for the receiver. That's the receiver. Like, for as a recipient, I think.
How for a pathology service or a radiology service, do you know which provider number to populate that bit? You don't, and it certainly doesn't go on, written request forms.
No, mostly it's just names, and it's
even names. I mean, you write a request to a service because you don't actually know which practitioners are going to be at a service on any particular day. You very rarely request a specific radiologist or a specific pathologist. I've never seen this.
But hang on,
it's not right.
Hang on.
There's a copy choose.
This is about the reports being sent back, right? Isn't it? Like, this is not about the directing the request.
I think the request is. That's
is
still
about copy.
I think that's still a thing, reports. But that's a different thing.
So after the report's been created, who else are you sending it to? And I would have thought that the requester actually knows who they want it sent to, right? There's
not a doctor.
No,
just a service.
They often only know the service, like to the private hospital or to the practice that the patient sometimes visits, and at both of those, you don't know if a practitioner is going to actually be there on any particular day, or who it should be directed to. The service will decide that. They'll send it to medical records, and very commonly in the pathology area, there'll be a copy to medical records or a copy to an associated practice, not to a particular practitioner.
Yeah, I think in that case, the copy to where it's not an individual, like it's not a specific person.
Brett, this was your issue.
That was my ticket.
What would you like?
I'd like it in there, but because I think if it was relaxed to.
So I mean, the two arguments are that we put it in now and we work through what we have to do with healthcare service to put it in. Right, we have to work through all the requirements to put healthcare service in. The alternative is we leave it as is and consider future use, which is not us saying it's a bad idea. It's just saying that we'll come back to it with the detail, right? So, because I don't know, do we have the detail we need now in order to put healthcare service in with the requirements for eRequesting Release 1?
Well, I mean, if you don't think that you want to do the work associated with that, then I think you need to make the scope constraint explicit and actually change the scope to be messaging or result return to practitioners and not healthcare services, because
you can't do it
until it's been revised. So you need to narrow the scope if you're not going to have the capability.
Okay, I'm chair. I can't motion anything. So someone needs to come up with what they think we should be deciding.
I'm not going to motion or second anything because I don't run any e-requesting systems. So I'm going to let that. I'm just pointing out a gap, I think. Yep.
What's the minimum we need for a healthcare service? Is it just the text name for the service? Could we just scope it down to being the
I think
minimal requirement?
yeah, I think that's kind of like at the moment you get a form with something written on it. Right, so that says who the copy twos are, unless you're in a more structured setup, right? So I think if you were doing minimal, you'll have a name on it of the service, and if you were thinking of something useful, you'd add an identifier to it.
And we can add other fields as we get, from the ADHA,
Let's have a look.
perhaps.
Yeah, because I think like a lot of the, I mean, I'm just thinking like secure messaging capability, like a lot of them have HPO lookup, or their own internal exchange identifiers, right? Which is an option in the structured stuff, right? Because you'll just go, I'm getting this from the health link directory, so I can put the health link ID in that exchange. So I'm very explicit about where I want you to send it.
This is the AE Core Healthcare Service.
Yeah. Yeah. So whilst it's yeah,
Okay,
the thing is,
right.
like, even AU Core doesn't mention those secure message IDs, but they're defined in the old provider directory specification, and they actually exist in the real world.
Yeah, and the only mandatory thing is the name. So
Yeah. Yeah, so like if you could supply it, like HPO is a good candidate because it's one of the ways you can locate an endpoint supplier. Yeah.
but it's optional.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking of other ways to cheat, but because you can use a logical identifier on the reference and display, because you haven't stopped me doing that. But you'd have to know what type of thing. Yeah. It's which means you could only supply an identifier, or well, I suppose you could supply a name, but like it's just kind of bypassing the constraint you put on.
All right.
Yeah.
We do need to wrap this up.
Anyway.
So I suppose to me, the two option is the accept this resolution as we consider future use. Anyone can bring a proposal to this as well. If someone wants to develop a proposal and bring it to the TDG and say, this is how I think this needs to work in eRequesting. Or we have a proposal now, which is to do something like add the AU Core Healthcare Service in. But we do need to understand the implications for eRequesting of doing that. Is this fit for purpose as is?
I think
If we-
I think Vince's point's a good one. Like it's either yes, we're volunteering to do the work, or we have to say that we don't do that currently. Yeah.
All right. And the like moving forward, how about this second one, location specific imaging? Was that less contentious? Was about that?
I think that's
is it
actually
about
on the
directing.
Yeah, I think healthcare service is another answer for that too. Because
Yeah,
you
that's
just
why it
direct,
is noted in here. It's
yeah.
saying supporting task location in addition to task owner or allowing task owner to reference healthcare service may be appropriate approaches. And so it's saying further assessment about the delivery, about line communication request, other e-requesting profiles and consisting. So that was the key argument here. If we're looking at healthcare service, we should look at it holistically and go, you know what, it applies here and it applies there and it applies over there. Make sure we have a profile that is appropriate for uses in all those places. And how it's going to be used with guidance and all that kind of stuff that goes with it. That was kind of the
because I think
reasoning here about having these two.
Yeah, because I think that'd be like you'd use that in the actual service request as the performer.
Yeah.
And you could include location detail in the healthcare service.
Yes.
Reference because because you're actually requesting it to be serviced at that location by that.
That's right.
In that if it's really quite directed not just to a like a company, a service provider, but a specific more detail there in the request. I don't think you should do it on task. Is the short answer. Because it's part of the request. It's not part of the.
Yeah, and there has been that argument about performer. This one was in particular about the so we're currently using the owner though for directing. So we are using that owner for directed requests.
The
so
task,
that's in the context. Yeah.
The task, not the service delivery.
Yeah. There is an argument there about performer. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Noted.
Yeah. Yeah. That's. I mean, you could, but like to me, you'd probably want to state it in the service request.
We can add to that.
Yeah.
That's there. That could be performer. Okay. Are we at a deadlock? Does no one have any? Does no one want to motion either of these? Does anyone want to go away and come back with a proposal for healthcare service?
I guess I'm confused by the directing to a particular radiologist. I find a bit confusing. I'm not sure of the use case of that. So, but I mean, we kind of do this with the organization already. So I'm curious to see where Andy's heading with this, to be honest. So yeah. I think.
Yeah, I think it's like it is that thing, that play off between organization and healthcare service. And like I'm only coming from previous discussions where there's a lot of service delivery that there is one managing entity that is the organization. And so if you really want to split, if you're talking about recipients in terms of endpoints, or in service delivery, you actually have a whole bunch of sub entities, which they tend to like currently the thought around provider directories was that healthcare services is a better vehicle because it lets you identify things like location, who's the managing organization, if you need to, which is more of a corporate contactable business entity.
Right,
and then healthcare service is more about the delivery part of that, which gives you locations, hours of opening, and other kind of information about the actual service delivery and facilities and capabilities of the service, and a whole bunch of things like that. So there's no one to peg that stuff in organization. So it was more about like thinking about some of the other things you need to know about the service delivery. And in this case, you don't really need to know much except what they're called and where to send stuff. But in a more general sense, it's like, because even if I said get a particular service done, how do I know you can perform that service? And that's part of like the consumer directories, and the National Health Services Directory has some of that kind of information, but it can get down to very specific things like which kind of requests can you service at some point? Where do I make my appointments? Stuff like that. So it's I think it's just that, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. So it's still because it kind of forces you to have an organization at every point of contact otherwise. Which is
I think
part
to
of the
me,
problem.
that's the argument for considered future use, right? We actually need to go through and do healthcare service properly, right? And make sure it's fit for purpose. We could just throw it in now and hope for the best, or we can consider future. Like I said, consider future use is just put it on the backlog, right? It doesn't mean we're not going to do it, right? It just means we're not doing it right now. So,
I mean, the target is a standard for trial use. And I think that if we actually want to, get information about how it works, providing healthcare service will do that. If no one uses it, or have difficulty using it, then that will be a good feedback trial.
well, I think also though that this hasn't come up in Connectathon or anything when anyone's been using this. No one's asked to say, "Oh, this is missing healthcare service. We need it."
I don't think we've had any healthcare services involved in the case.
Yeah.
So,
It's also everybody knows each other in the room, right? This is
Yeah.
kind of the
Oh,
case
yeah.
where you've got a bunch of services and you're just looking for capability, right? And going, I can send you here or here or here, right? And then having a way that you can determine they can do the service, but also then getting responses. Where should I send the response? And that's really up to the who's
Either way,
requesting it. Yeah.
we can't continue unless someone makes a motion
Yeah.
and it's seconded and we vote on it. So, and I can't do any of that.
Okay.
So we need someone to, or we just have to park them. And if someone can come back with a proposal for an alternate approach in the future.
Yeah, it's actually volunteering to do that is the main thing.
Yeah.
if we've got to, yeah. Yeah, like I think the other thing, sorry, is like if we do relax it, even to allow it, it does create the consequence that everyone consuming it now needs to say that that's another thing that can happen as well. So that's kind of, it's not just people creating these things. It's actually when you go to consume them, if you get a healthcare service there, you'll need to do, you'll be even though you may not have obligations, you've still got this hole now where you don't know what to do with it unless you put obligations on it. So it's kind of, yeah, it is having to flesh it out considerably, I think, to get it in.
All right. I don't see any resolution.
We're going nowhere. Yeah.
We're going nowhere. So the next step for those, I don't know whether someone wants to propose something else or we just go to an electronic vote on these. I don't know. We seem to be at deadlock. We'll have to park them for now and come back to them.
Well, I think if there's no proposal to do anything different, I think it's fine to go to a vote and
yeah.
The
I do need someone to motion.
Yeah, someone has to.
So we have proposed dispositions. If no one is willing to, this has been through co-chair triage. These are the dispositions that the co-chairs have agreed to put in. I seem to be lacking some co-chairs in this meeting today.
So Angus had to drop. Yeah.
Yep. So maybe we need to bring it back when we've got more co-chairs available to support this position. So I might do that.
If you want to, but I'm happy to propose that we put it aside for the moment and do the work later on. I can't remember what the wording was.
Consider for future use?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think we will need it at some stage, but I think it's a lot of work.
Yep.
At the moment.
Yeah. Thanks, Kerry. I think that's the point. Well, we'll take that on this first one. Was the first one. So we have a motion then to accept this proposal, consider future use for the healthcare service on communication request sender, which was the actual issue. So is anyone willing to second that?
I can second it, Michael.
Okay, thank you. So we will go to a vote, and that's right. Then we've got the vote to go on. And we'll find it. Vote for the current motion. Okay, so we're voting and consider future use on communication request sender data types to include healthcare service. Okay, we've got most people have voted now, so I'll defend that. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we have 11 plus 1 in the chat, 12 affirmative, 1 negative, and 5 abstain. Okay, thank you. So that motion has passed. And like I said, this is considered future use, so that we can pull this back in at any point. What about for the second one? Same boat. So this one was on location-specific imaging. So this was about assigning a location for the request. Same boat. current proposal is for consider for future use. And I think it would make sense to look at these things together in the context of the healthcare service. Is anyone interested in motioning for that? You got one before?
Well, I'll motion for it, Michael. Sure.
Okay. Thanks, Adrian.
Yep. Making notes on it.
I'll second that one.
Okay. Thanks, Brett. So we've got Brett as a second, as Adrian as a motioned it. I will launch a vote again. So this is to consider for future use on the location-specific imaging. These will also, anything that's considered future use would go on our IG. I'll show you after the vote where this will end up. That's 15. Any other lagging votes around? I'll enter in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. In poll, we have 13 affirmative, plus 1 in the chat, 14 affirmative, 0 negative, and 3 abstain. So that motion has passed. It's a good conversation. I'll just show you that in the future of eRequesting, this is where we'll likely put in the bottom of this page our backlog of things that have been deferred, so that they are there, they're not lost, and that they're there so we know to pull them in future.
Michael, I think there may be some backgrounds of this week where we've come across sort of during testing or pilot, we've come across sort of an organization that they wish to split up their sites basically because that's the actual use case. So I think this has come out of findings to align with that. So and it's how to support that process. So obviously the communication request now has to go back to whichever site came from in the first place and the right person, I think. So
No, I think it's just like we said. I think it's just working through the detail of the use case, making sure we've got appropriate modeled to work. So okay, for time we've got 20 minutes left. So the next 3 are related. So we'll talk through those. I think I have them in the right order, but we'll go through them together before we look to vote, just because they are all related. So what's the first one? About the chat. Okay. This one's got all the detail in it. But this is about service request occurrence short in their eRequesting diagnostic request profile is inappropriate and should be removed. So the short should be concise description of what an element means. The profile specific implementation guidance should be placed in implementation guidance. The existing short repeats what is defined in the profile. The qualifier short and definition are sufficient. And the sentence, the server will not process this information, is unclear and potentially contradictory given the server obligation. So I will just show you in eRequesting what we're talking about. In our service request, we have occurrence. Okay. And then we have this short, just in a little bit, we have this short description here about occurrence. And it's occurrence X. It can be a date, time, period, or timing. This may be used to cover 3 needs: a target date for the test to be performed, a date range for the test to be performed, the frequency of the test to be performed, possibly rule 3. The server will not process information which is informative only. There is no alignment to regulations or policy. So the first issue was saying this is not a short. Basically, this detail is implementation guidance or profile specific guidance. A short is designed to be a short description of the attribute. So the key issue here was that that's not a short. So just look at one of the other issues. So This one's about quantity. Well, actually, let's just jump to the last one. So this one I'll put in the chat too. So this one's about quantity, and this one's talking about service request quantity. The short contains implementation guidance, informative value indicating the number of fulfillments requested, if not provided the quantity is 1. So I'll just show you that again in here. It is on quantity. So this text here. So the same arguments being made here that this is not a short, that this is profile-specific implementation guidance and belongs up here without other profile-specific implementation guidance. So those two are kind of related. They're on different elements. That was that one there. And then there is another one here, which is actually about clarifying the use of service request quantity. That one in the chat. Okay. So here it's saying service request quantity description is an informative value indicating the number of fulfillments requested. The wording suggests a different meaning to the core FIRE definition, which is about the amount of service being requested, e.g. amount, radiation dose, number of visits a month, or like. Core FIRE does not provide examples of this element, but does not seem clear that quantity is the right choice to represent number of fulfillments. And considering the use case other than diagnostic requests, for example, radiotherapy or service requests defined by cost. Whether the number of fulfillments is better expressed using ServiceRequest.occurrence.repeat.count. So this is actually saying that we think that we're not using quantity correctly because we have a quantity, number of fulfillments requested, and then we have an occurrence, which is the period it's being proposed to be fulfilled in. So these are all related. I think the key resolution has been put in the first one, 51854. So I might just talk through the resolution of that one because I think it's all been summarized here. So the proposal here is that we remove the short on service request occurrence and use the inherited short of when service should occur. So that's FIRE defines the short on service request occurrence X as when a service should occur. So that seems fit for purpose. We don't actually need to modify that. So we can just remove the short we'd put in there. But then what we should do is add some guidance and examples for eRequesting diagnostic requests to show how occurrence can be used to represent different requests. For example, a requested target date for the service to be performed. So this would be the occurrence date time, and it's got a particular date on it. A requested date range for the service to be performed. So this would be an occurrence period with a start and an end date. And then we get into things here which cross over with quantity. So the number of times the service is requested to be performed and the time frame in which they intended, e.g. 6 INR tests to be performed over the next 6 months. So you'll see in occurrence timing, there is a repeat element. In that, there is a count, so 6, and then a period of the start and end date. So this would be 6 of these to be performed in this 6-month period. And you could even be more complex. So there's potentially a more complex example of 6 INR tests to be performed once a month over the next 6 months. So occurrence timing here allows you to say, I can repeat it. The frequency is once over a period of 1. So this is once a month, 6 times between this period. So this shows how the intent of the occurrence can actually include count and how it's intended to be used because it is a repeat count. I want you to repeat this many times.
So that's,
sorry,
that's not a real example, as in INRs is never with a number. So if we're going to look at trying to use that example as to how we would use this properly, then that's not real because it's never
interesting.
6.
It's interesting because that was taken directly from our current use cases, which are defined. Yeah, which is here. 6 INR tests performed over the next 6
and
months.
it's something that was discussed during the meetings, making up these things, and that is not correct. So it's not 6, it's however many you feel like during 6 months. There are other tests that are like 3 or whatever. There's different rules, but it's as many tests as you like. So that's why I don't mind. Just would like to.
So I think that's a good point. We shouldn't continue to use a bad example. So this was just put in here because this was already in the use case to tie it back to a use case. But what we can actually do here too, because you'll notice here that this doesn't specify the types. I would actually say we actually propose adjust the fields here. Oh, wrong one. Cancel. Triage.
Can I ask a question about that? Is like the actual request is an authority to bill, basically. So is that how it's done on the paper now? It just says.
Yeah, on the paper it says INR Rule 3 exemption. That's all it says. And what that is, it's a request to the pathologist that does the test that says you can do as many of these during the 6-month period that the patient needs.
Cool. Excellent. That's great. Thank you.
So the count is optional in here too. So I don't know whether, so I think this is still a valid, if we take INR out, 6 tests to be performed over the next 6 months, right? So we won't say it because this example, for example, doesn't have what the test is, right? This is just showing how the occurrence part works. And this would be
maybe 3 people
tests.
lock off bloods over the period of 3 days might be a better example.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem I have is that there is a real case where you are requesting on one request, you're requesting a number of tests, and that is billed to the MBS. That's each time you use that for that request, each time you do the test, that is billable and you will get paid by MBS for each of those occurrences. But if I send out a request and say, I'd like a U&E done every week for the next 10 weeks. Basically, it was requested on today, and the pathologist will get paid nothing other than the one amount for today's U&E. So it either has to fall within the rules and the way that it's used, or then it shouldn't be used as a general thing. That's all I'm saying. So if you say we haven't got a test in there, if you put a test in there and you're going to put a count, it can only be the ones that you're allowed to request that way. And there's not many.
So I think the key with this is this isn't tied, like this doesn't actually talk about Rule 3, right?
Yeah.
Given that there could be a genuine that this is the request, I want it done this many times in this period, regardless of billing.
Yep.
Right. So this is basically indicating how the occurrence timing with it's not specific to Rule 3. Right?
No, okay.
So I think because of the complexity of Rule 3, we actually need another mechanism for Rule 3 about how Rule 3 is indicated and the like, right? This is more that we had 2 different elements. One was count and the other was, one was occurrence and the other one was quantity. And this is basically saying, well, we shouldn't have quantity, right? Quantity can be covered by occurrence timing. But Rule 3 is a whole nother thing, right?
Yeah, sure. It's just that if the pathology is receiving requests for items that they want done, every week for the next 6 weeks, they're not going to accept that. So they'll just say, we'll do the first one.
They will if they're going to bill it privately. So.
Okay, bill it all outside yeah, well,
And billing considerations are actually outside of the scope of the
yes,
request.
they are, but I'm just trying to make the rule here that we're talking about. Do we have that or not? No, I don't think we need the shorts, but what is it going to be covered by? That's all. So if it's defined somewhere else, that's fine. The quantity and the timing.
Sorry, what was the last bit there, Kerry, about the?
So I don't think we need the shorts. I just think
Oh, sorry,
that
yes. So,
we can use what we have,
yes, so
but I mean, I don't think
So-
we need to put the 6, and we just need the statement that says you can put the occurrence and get rid of the INR thing.
okay, so you would suggest that we don't put this guidance in about how to use it, and we just basically say that we basically, I think let's have a look at the other issue here. So maybe we'll come back to this one because that one had the guidance in it. So this one's about clarify the use of quantity X. So here, service request quantity X. Let's look at the resolution. In eRequesting diagnostic request profile, use service request occurrence timing repeat count to represent the number of fulfillments rather than service request quantity. Remove all conformance requirements on quantity, and then basically saying service request quantity is defined as that. Using it for the number of fulfillments is inconsistent with the definition. That's just the reasoning. So this ticket here is basically saying remove quantity. So if we're happy with that, then we can come back to the other ones about what we actually say about it. This one is just saying that we remove quantity, and we'll say that occurrence repeat count can cover that requirement for us.
We're removing the short, or we're removing
Removing the must support. So this will say, so if we have a
Okay.
look at the moment, we have must support, sorry. We have occurrence and it's a must support. And then we have quantity with a must support and some obligations. So what this one is actually saying that, oh, sorry, get to the right one. What this one is saying is that we will use service request occurrence time and repeat count rather than quantity. And so we'll remove all conformance requirements, profile customization, examples of involving service request quantity from the IG. Right. So we won't say we're using quantity because we believe we were using it incorrectly. That was not the intended use for quantity. And that's it. And then the rest is just the justification, basically, which was repeating what was in the ticket. So we're interested in motioning for this one.
Yeah, I'll motion that.
Thanks, Karen. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. So I will launch that vote. Oh, I'm still sharing. So this is to accept the resolution of persuasive modification to remove conformance requirements, customizations on service request quantity. Okay, I think we're pretty much there. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the poll, share results. We've got 13 plus 1 in the chat, 14 affirmative, 0 negative, and 4 abstain. So we've got a couple of minutes really quickly. So this one we can say is not persuasive. So this is about moving the guidance in service request quantity to the profile specific implementation guidance. We just voted to remove any conformance requirements on quantity. So this one we will say is not persuasive. The resolution for the one we just went through removes all conformance requirements and examples for service request quantity from the IG. So we don't need to move any guidance because we just took that away now. So I wonder if this is actually, yeah, So we will not have any customizations left on that. So this doesn't need to be done. So if we're happy to motion and accept that, we can quickly vote on this one before the end of the meeting as well.
I'm happy to motion that.
Thanks, Kerry. We have a second.
I can second that, Jamie.
Thanks, Jamie. I'll launch the vote. Launch. Okay, pretty much there. Line in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Poll. So we have 12 affirmative plus 1 in the chat, 13 affirmative, 0 negative, and 2 abstain. I don't think we've run out of time now to resolve it, but I think, Kerry, your point then on the other one, which I have, is about this guidance, is that we're actually better off saying less than more and just say that the quantity can be, well, we can actually, if you're happy to motion that, we can actually do a quick vote if you just want to say that.
Yeah, I'm happy to motion that.
Okay, so we'll just say that persuasive modification and the guidance should just indicate that quantity, that count can be used in occurrence timing, and without the examples. Was that, did I paraphrase you?
Yes. Yes, I don't think we should use bad examples. It's clear. Yep.
Any second on that?
I'll second. This is Caleb.
Thanks, Caleb. Michael, you happy with the motion there that we've got for the minutes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'll just launch that. Launch poll. Continue. So this is just to add some guidance to say that occurrence.repeat.count can be used to state the number of tests. Okay, I'll end that in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and poll. So we have 12 affirmative, plus 1 in the chat, 13 affirmative, 1 negative, and 1 abstain. So that motion has passed as well. So thank you, everyone. We're out of time. There's one we missed at the end of this. We'll roll over to another meeting. Future meetings will be 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, Brisbane time, 12 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. I'll send out the forward schedule of meetings today. Thanks, everyone. It was a good meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.